Now, before we go into the installation process for the cargo rack, let's quickly review some of the details, some of the unique features of the Vagabond Motorsports cargo rack for the 2024 KTM Duke 390. So the kit includes both the cargo rack body and a hardware kit. The hardware pack is simply 4 class 10.9, so high strength steel flanged head bolts, zinc plated, so they're corrosion resistant, and a pair of aluminum spacers. The cargo rack body itself, proudly manufactured here in the United States. It is constructed from a single sheet of 1/8 inch thick steel that's CNC laser cut and CNC formed. It's got a 2-stage finishing process, so first galvanized, then UV resistant satin black powder coat. So very durable, very corrosion resistant, and it should match the kind of like the finishes of the motorcycle from an OEM standpoint. As for kind of the cosmetic aspect, you can see it's got kind of this tapered construction where it should flow very nicely with the kind of tapered tail section or the subframe of the Duke 390. From a structural standpoint, the arms are obviously holding up the load plate. They have folded over flanges both on the bottom and between the mounting bolts to add some structural rigidity. The top plate of the cargo rack kit has, or the top plate of the cargo rack has these 4 holes on the front and rear flanges that allow you to kind of hook in, whether they're bungee cords or straps, to load up the rear plate. But also there are a set of 6 stainless steel threaded inserts, and those are M6 threads, so they'll work with either the Vagabond Motorsports cargo rack clamp plate kit. That is a big kind of washer plate that can squeeze kind of just any universal crate or case that you want to mount. But this will also bolt right up to the GV universal plates for their mono key and mono lock plates. So if you want to be able to add those cases without the kind of ungainly universal, like those kind of clamps that they supply with those cases, this is an excellent kit for that. As for tools you need for the installation of the cargo rack, you mostly just need a 12mm socket and a ratchet, and some way to pry out the factory plugs on the subframe. I don't necessarily recommend you use a flat-bladed screwdriver, although that could work. I'm going to use these plastic, they look like razor blades, but they're plastic and they help a lot for either scraping or prying out these plastic plugs. Again, things you don't necessarily need but would recommend would be a torque wrench to help set a final torque on the structural bolt holding the rack on, as well as some kind of retaining compound or thread locker for those 4 structural bolts. Something like either Loctite blue or Permatex orange, a medium to high strength but removable thread locker is recommended here. Now the install of the rack is really quick, and arguably the hardest part are getting out these 4 plastic plugs out of the subframe of the motorcycle. Now, like I mentioned, you could take a flathead screwdriver and jam it in there. I hesitate to recommend that because you probably would mar or scratch the paint off your subframe. So the way that I've figured out how to do it, maybe not the best way, but it does work, is to use a pair of these plastic scrapers to get underneath the head of the plug, and at which point you can kind of pry them out. Sometimes they come right out, and sometimes you need to work them. And the main thing here is to obviously not scratch the motorcycle. And when the plugs come out, you can see they kind of have those serrated teeth on them. I would keep these just in case you want to pop them back in when you take the cargo rack off, or if you take the cargo rack off. Now, as mentioned, if you've got available, use either blue Loctite from Loctite, or Permatex makes an orange thread locker that actually works really well too. So go ahead and put a small amount on each of the end of the fasteners. These fasteners are going to go very deep into the subframe, so just a little bit of thread locker on the tips of each one will go a long way to keep this thing from vibrating off. As for installation of the rack, it really should just kind of, once those plugs are out, the rack will slide kind of forward, and with those bolts that have Loctite on them, just start everything a few threads. Start with the most forward bolts, the ones that do not use a spacer, and hold up the rack with your other hand. And I wouldn't recommend sweating the spacer just yet, but on one of the rear ones, set a bolt. And all this does is allow the cargo rack to essentially float without it falling onto the turn signals. Once you've got that, then you should go ahead and put in the fourth bolt. Again, the rear ones are the long bolts with one of the spacers, and then you can remove that kind of third bolt you put in to hold the rack up initially, then go back in. So it's really that simple. 4 bolts, 4 threaded inserts on the subframe of the motorcycle, and then grab your 12mm socket and go about tightening these. Now if you do have a torque wrench, go ahead and set that to 26 foot-pounds, which I believe is 36 Newton meters, and go around the motorcycle and send those to that torque level, and that's going to help ensure that the rack does not come loose from kind of standard vibrations of the motorcycle. With that, the installation of the rack is complete. Now the installation is complete, we'll give you a couple kind of walk around views of the installed rack on the motorcycle. This bike also has our fender eliminator kit on it. You can see there are kind of small but gaps between the seat and the cargo rack all the way around and the subframe. You can see how the spacers kind of work to fill in a small gap on the rear 2 bolts. Otherwise, yeah, it kind of flows very well with the body lines of the motorcycle. The passenger seat or the rear seat on the Duke 390 pops forward, so there's no concern about removing the seat. Again, that's kind of the top plate, and how it kind of fits in with the kind of the total body lines of the motorcycle. Thank you for watching this video. Our products can be found at www.vagabondmotorsports.com. Thank you.